they come out of here, and there's my deer blind over there. I don't know if you can see the orange, little orange marker thing. But for me, from here, you can't really see the deer blind as being this noticeable thing. Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors and the Cheap, and I thought I'd do a video contrasting the tree stand with the ground blind made from natural materials. So I'm not talking about tree stands and ground blinds you buy. I'm talking about going out in the woods with a folding saw or an axe, a little bit of twine like this, and just rigging it up, right? How long it takes, the relative merits of the two approaches, and so on and so forth. So come along with me. I got an old tree stand that I made a number of years ago that's really not safe anymore, and a ground blind that I made very recently. I'll show you the difference in them and talk about putting them together, how I constructed them, and which I'm sort of, which I seem to prefer now, right? But you use whatever's good for you. So let's go have a look. Come with me. So here we are with the ground blind, and both the tree stand and the ground blind have their merits. So I'll speak to the merits of the ground blind, and then I'll speak to the demerits of the ground blind. And I'm speaking here to one just thrown together with natural materials, maybe a little bit of a rope, or I'll use bank line, this is what bank line is, right? Tarred bank line, or twine, any sort of twine, right, to put together. So the ground blind is easier if you're just using natural materials, what you can find. It's easier to put together. You can literally use the dead trees you find on the ground and a bit of twine and a bit of ingenuity to throw together a ground blind. There's an argument that it doesn't mask your scent as well, because when you're up in a tree, your scent sort of blowing up in the air and so on and so forth. And that you're also more within the deer's line of sight. I think all this changes relative to how far a deer is away from you, and I'll speak more to that as we go along here. But yeah, here's a very simple ground blind that took about an hour to construct. All right, so I just literally used branches that were lying on the ground to throw this thing together. I got I basically put in a post, another post over there, and another post over there, attached cross members using the jam knot, 1, 2, 3, 4. The last one's just attached to the naturally existing tree. This is my entrance. This direction here is, of course, I could see deer over here, but the main trail, you can see, I don't know if you can see over there, but I got some orange marker, but basically there's a deer trail coming out of that thicket over this way, and it goes that way. There's a deer trail over there coming this way in this hardwood forest, and the deer come up from that direction. And that's basically an intersection. They come up this way, they come from over there, and they come from up there. Of course, there's deer activity back that way as well, but it's less likely, let's put it that way. In terms of the highest traffic trails, there's one coming from over there, there's one coming from over there, and there's a pretty well-used deer trail coming up this way. Okay, so sitting down here in this, right, I'm fairly well hidden. The only thing, basically my neck and head are above the the concealed part of the blind. Everything else is below the blind. And I would and basically all the for lack of a better term, kill zones are about 25 yards away. I expect to see the deer coming around that big maple. That's about 25 yards. Over here, where the orange tape is about 25 yards away. And over there, that's about as far as I can see too. In any direction I can see about 25 yards. And then it's just too thick to see anything. And I have found hunting in these sort of tight, thick woods, and this is a hardwood forest, so this is really the most open woods I can find. When you start getting into the conifer forest, it's like that over there, which is about 10, 15 yards from me, where you just can't see anything, right? You can see your hand in front of your face, and that's about it. It's so thick, so there's just no point. And the deer tend to use these sort of more open trails, right? Because they can't get through it either. All of the odd time they will have a way through that thick stuff, but they prefer sort of well-defined trails that I have identified here, right? So for me, the ground blind, at least at this point in my hunting career, seems to be the better trick. I've got a little sort of homemade seat that I can sit on that's just the right height for me, because I made it for me, right? That took, I don't know, 15 minutes to make, right? I've got a video on how to make that, the bush chair, I think I call it. And if you had it in just the right spot, you could use, you know, an existing tree as almost a back to the chair. And I'm sure there's a way to make a bush recliner for yourself. But I need to be able to, you know, look this way, and look this way. If it turns out that there's a deer behind me, I'll deal with that when it happens. It's happened to me before. But I've taken deer in ground blinds. They totally work. There may be the case that you're using ground blinds and they aren't working, and you think they aren't working because of your scent or some other thing. That may be the case, right? But if you've got a ground blind set up to receive the deer from a number of different directions, right? Here we've got, what are these directions here? North, east, south. That's the basic directions. Behind me, if I'm facing, what's this? East is west, right? So I've got 3 directions to face with, in terms of myself being covered, right? And that's the direction the deer tend to come from in this area. Remember, I'm out here all times of year. I see the deer tracks, right? So most of the time the deer tracks are coming from that direction, up this hill and that way. Sometimes they'll come from that direction and go that way. But it's rare they actually come this way. Sometimes they do, but it's not as typical. But anyway, that's the ground blind. So the advantages: easy to make, less precarious, and also when you're in a ground blind, it's warmer. You're connected to the ground. There's less wind, right? You're more sort of, right? You get in here and you get underneath all of this stuff, and you're just more protected. There's less wind blowing around you. You know, so you're sort of connected to the ground in a sense, right? So it's a bit warmer, and that matters because, you know, for me, really, you're sitting in a deer blind, you pretty much sit there as long as you can take it. And when you start getting cold, you start getting fidgety, you want to get up and moving around, you know, you become less and less interested in staying in the blind as you start getting cold, right? So there's an advantage to having something you can stay warm in. And sure, if you're driving right to it in an ATV and you've got some giant snowsuit you're going to sit in and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. I hike here. This is about 1 kilometer from my house, and it's all uphill. It's downhill to my house from here, so it's sort of an ideal spot because it's easier to get the deer out. This is the forest behind my house. But by the time I get to this blind, I'm, you know, peeling off clothes because I've gotten warm. Right, so I'm not going to be, you know, wearing some snowsuit out here. I guess I could carry it with me, I suppose. But you know, yeah, there's only so much you can carry out and have with you when you're in the blind. So I find the ground blind is a little bit warmer, and yeah, it's of course you are more in the deer's line of sight. But because you've got such good cover, right? You're just throwing, you know, stuff from the woods. You're just throwing stuff against it, you know. So it's pretty quick to erect, right? You could put 4 posts in the ground or use existing trees, and then on each side you would tie a dead log, like an X, right? Once you've done that, you just start throwing stuff. Whatever you can find against it, and there's no shortage of stuff like that here. And there's things you can do to make it more natural and appear more natural. But you know, let me just go over here to where I expect let me just, for interest's sake, here, I'll put my, it's an orange thing here, okay? I'll put an orange thing on the blind. You can see that, okay? Now let me just go to where I expect to see a deer emerging from the thick woods, right? Okay, so you see that marker there, right? Okay, so this, I don't know how well you can tell that, but this is a deer trail coming out of that thick woods. They've made, I can walk it, right? They've made a path for themselves coming through that. And I can discern it as a noticeable deer trail. That's where they come out of the woods. They go this way, all right? They come out of here, and there's my deer blind over there. I don't know if you can see the orange, little orange marker thing. But for me, from here, you can't really see the deer blind as being this noticeable thing. You notice the orange, right? But it just looks like a fallen tree or a pile of brush over there. It really doesn't, you know, it doesn't really stand out. It just comes, because I used the natural materials that were kicking around, right? Just dead stuff laying on the ground. It just looks like everything else. Ultimate camo, right? It is the forest floor, right? So it just looks like a natural hill or a mound or whatever. Doesn't really look like anything, except for that orange thing on it, right? Here, let's look at it. Just put this up there. Make it as big as I can make it. All right, you see that? Okay, so this is approaching it from the east. All right, so there's a very obvious deer trail that comes from that way. It's really thick over there, and it's really thick over there, and there's just a narrow sort of trail going along the ridge of the forest. Again, I'm out here all times of the year. In the winter, it's really easy to see where the deer go. And of course, they have different paths they take in the winter and the summer. But the winter's the best time to get a sense of deer activity and where their main trails are, right? So there's a ravine here, and it's very rocky and very treacherous. In that ravine, it's like a moraine. It's basically rocks and stuff that the water runs through. So the deer go along this nice ridge here. That's just what they do. I've seen the tracks, right? So they come up the path, and there's my deer blind up there, right? I don't know how well you can see the orange. I can't really see it on the camera screen here, but it's very easy to see standing here naturally, looking up. So the deer blind doesn't look particularly noticeable from here. It looks like on this side, because I used different materials and there was some existing trees, it just looks like little spruce trees, a thicket of little spruce trees. Okay, so that's how I look from this angle. From a deer's point of view, right? Or to put it even better here, I'm going to go down on one knee, right? This is what the deer sees, right? Because now I'm the height of a deer. I'll hold you where my head is. That's what the deer sees from here. Okay, so now I'm going to approach the blind from the south, all right? So let's just go down that way. All right, so very obvious deer trail going this way. And then you see the leaves turned up, and in the winter you see the tracks. All right, so this is where I expect the deer to, what did I say here? You can see the trail going up this way. It's fairly obvious. Of course, I've basically made it I removed a lot of branches because I use it too. Now that I'm hunting, I don't use this trail at all. I've made a really crappy trail up there that I use parallel to it, okay? But the deer come this way, and you'll see all kinds of tracks here. I expect the deer to be sort of in my sights at this distance, which is, again, about 25 yards, okay? So I'm at deer height right now. That's where I'm holding the camera. I'm on one knee. I don't know if you can see the orange where my blind is, but the blind does not stand out as unnatural at all. I mean, if I didn't have that orange thing there, I don't think you'd notice it at this distance, right? And I'm not bow hunting, right? And you can, of course, a 25-yard shot is, you know, a normal bow hunt or crossbow. I'm just using a rifle, but I mean, really, it's so thick here, right? You can't see much more than 25 yards anyway. right? So you can use a shotgun, you can use a rifle, you know, whatever you want, sort of thing, right? Because it's close enough that any one of those things will work just fine. But that's what the deer is going to see. So of course the ground blind is going to work here. Now I'm just going to take you to another spot that I've hunted previously. I don't really use anymore because I'm sort of out of the tree stand business. You know, in my early 40s, 30s, I used a tree stand. I like the idea of it. I like the just, you know, sort of have a command position. You can see further. You're not in the deer's line of sight, so they don't tend to notice you. Any animal for that matter. Right. Anyway, here's a spot where I built a tree stand, 10 years ago. Right, it's still standing. Now this one here, I built the ladder part using nails. I don't know how reliable this is anymore. Seems pretty good. I guess if you're using natural materials, and this is all natural materials, I would recommend spruce over something like maple, or certainly not birch. I find maple and birch don't last as long as spruce do. Now I'm reluctant to go up the ladder because I don't know how much life it has left in it. A little bit of life, so here we're up. This is about as far as I want to go up the ladder because this is 10 years old, right? So I don't really know how good it is, but you can see I basically made a triangle, right? I just attached one end of the triangle to that tree. I find 3 trees and I make a triangle platform. And the open part of the triangle, my legs come down through there. That's the idea, right? That's the seat. And this is sort of like a table. Or did I do it the other way? I think I actually sat there. Yeah, I would sit there, and this was like a place to put my backpack and stuff. And I had like a camo poncho that I would just drape over my body up here. But I would get crazy cold up here. And, you know, sometimes you sit in a blind, you get tired and sleepy. So, not good. But you can see I had a good position up here, right? I could see a good ways, right? I could remember when I was using this, a lot of this forest wasn't as high, right? But even with this, it's so thick, you still can't see things till they're 25 yards away. And I found that's about when the deer, if the wind's going towards them, I mean, they can smell you from further along, but sitting in a ground blind, when they're about 25 yards away, that's when they start looking up like, what's going on, what's strange? That's when they wind you, in my experience anyway. I'm sure they can wind you from further away, but, you know, that's when I don't use any of that special scent stuff, and I don't even really use proper camo most of the time. I usually just have gray, beige type stuff on. I find it works just as deer can't. Camo's for people. Camo's for hiding from people. Well, that's another video. I don't want to get into that here. Anyway, up here I had a really good view of things. You know, 10 years ago when I used this more often, or even 5 years ago, I think would have been the last year I used it. Yeah, I would get crazy cold up here. So I mean, it's an effective way to hunt a tree stand, but man. I can feel the wind up here. It's much windier than it was in my ground blind, right? It's just much, you know, there is more wind, and potentially it's carrying your scent away. And it really depends on whether the air currents are going up or down, right? It's definitely windier up here, and if it's windy, you're losing heat. So you have to you have to find means to mitigate the heat loss, or you just start losing stamina up in the tree, right? And you have to be careful you don't fall out of the tree. And this is not like, you know, this is not, you know, I wouldn't, if I was making this blind, I wouldn't title the video "Safest Tree Stand Ever." I would not title it that way, because it's not. But, you know, it worked. You know, I had 3 points of contact, and I think I reinforced this one here, right? So this worked just fine, right? And up, oh, let's get down here. I'll show you. It's falling apart now, but up in the tree, I had like a bunch of brush sort of just tied on, just rubbish, right, in front of me. Because I expected to see the deer. There's a pretty obvious deer trail that goes, so there's the blind, right? Now I'm facing the opposite direction, okay? There was a little puddle here. I don't know if they drink out of that or not, but it's just a naturally occurring sort of spring, which is weird because it's like the top of a hill. But there's an obvious deer trail that goes this way and this way, right? And off season, I've seen deer on it, right? There's a place I go way over there where I go down the hill to go fishing and stuff. And I've seen deer using this trail. So, I mean, this is a deer highway. It's one of the main ways they get through this ridge here, this mostly hardwood forest. So I was set up, right, there's the blind up there, right? I was set up with a blind to intercept them from here. But I had a heck of a time trying to get deer here because they tend to go here anyway. They tend to get pretty nocturnal during hunting season, which is smart for them to do, right? But anyway, that's why I had the camouflage just on this side, because it's the only, you know, solid, noticeable deer trail I could see in the area, right? There's thick forest here. There's no real trail coming through it. I'm sure they could walk through it if they want to, but there was no obvious trail coming through it. The main trail seemed to just be along there. It looks like a trail going this way, but I made that. You know, I could come into the blind, you know, from back there and just go up the tree nice and quiet right before sunrise and just sit here and wait for the light to appear. But anyway, that's the tree stand from natural materials, right? You build a ladder, right? That's the first thing. Build a ladder, then you build a platform. Find 3 trees, 1, 2, 3. You can find 4 trees too, but it's harder to find. Make a little triangle thingy. Make a little platform to sit on, make another little platform to put your backpack and stuff on, and go from here. It doesn't have to be high tech. If you're really smart, you put like guardrails around so you can lean against them or steady yourself or whatever. I didn't do that with this one, but in other tree stands I've made, I've put like, you know, up, let's say 2 feet from the part you're sitting on. You have like a rail going around it. I had one on the front. Right, you can see it's falling down, just tied on with string, right? So it's falling down now, but I had one on the front so I could use it as a gun rest and stuff like that. But now it's done. I guess one more point to speak to you, building this sort of thing. You can't use dead wood to make it, right? You have to use live tree. So it doesn't, you know, if you could find a dead standing spruce that was sound, sure. But you might have to, there might be 1 in every 20 dead standing spruce that have that quality. So you tend to use, you know, you have to cut down green trees to do this, right? Live trees, so that you know it's reliable, right? And it's going to last. So that's another drawback, right? You have to find trees, you have to cut them. And if you're somewhere you can't cut trees down, that's a problem, right? You know, you're breaking a rule or whatever. So that's all these stuff you have to think about. Like when I made this ladder, I had to use green. You know, I had to basically fell a viable spruce to make it. I'm not going to make a ladder out of dead trees and rotten wood, unless it's just a perfectly if you find a dead standing perfectly seasoned tree, that's as good as lumber, but that's pretty hard to find, right? So you end up using green wood, which means you have to fell trees, and you know, you need to be somewhere where you're allowed to do that. That's another advantage of the ground blind. You can just use rotten wood just lying around. Anyway, just a video contrasting the ground blind with the tree stand made from natural materials. Sure, there's all kinds of cool stuff you can buy and all that sort of stuff, but this is outdoors and cheap, and I've never bought any of that stuff. I just make stuff, you know, when you're coming out scouting, you do all this stuff before the season begins. You know, you come out, you scout the area out, you get a good sense of where you should set up, and then you just slap it together, right? Tree stand might take, you know, a whole afternoon to make, because has to be safe, has to be reliable. You have to make a ladder, you have to make a platform off of the ladder, right? It might take an afternoon, it might take 2 afternoons. It really depends on what kind of mood you're in and how much energy you've got. The ground blind takes about an hour, 2 at the very most if you're, not organized with your time. So for me, the ground blind is the way to go. But if you're young and you're spry and you like being up a tree, there's advantages to being up a tree. You can see further, and you're sort of out of the deer's line of sight. They're not looking at the trees, right? They're looking along the ground for movement. At least where I live here, right? We don't have things that it's conceivable. We've got the eastern cougar flying out of the tree and killing deer. But this is an object. This is a topic of conjecture, so I'm not going to get into that one. The eastern cougar, but I've never seen one, so we'll see what happens in the years to come. But anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.